Alright, this is my fleet. Now one of the three here needs some work. Two are rust-free and the other one needs a little help. Let's start with this one. That's a 22. Hasn't been in Minnesota long enough to establish any rust, so it can't be that one. This right here is a 67. But a quick glance tells you it can't be this one. So it leaves this 07 Silverado. Now I bought this one new. It spent its entire life in Minnesota. Earlier I replaced the box on it because the wheel wells were rusted out, and I've got a bunch of videos on that if you want to check that out. But this video I'm going to focus on these rockers. You can see passenger side here is bad all the way back to the cab corner. There's actually holes through there. Let's spin around. This driver's side's a little worse. There's actually holes in those rockers, and that cab corner is going too. So this video is going to be all about fixing this rust. I upgraded to that silver crew cab on the right last year. Now usually I get rid of the truck or the car I'm driving when I do that, but I usually regret it over time, and so this time I decided to hang on to that black 07. Let's take a look at some of the cars I've owned over the years. Every one of these things I've sold, and most of them I'd love to have back. Before we get started cutting into these rockers, I want to take a minute, just share a few thoughts. So this is the first time I've actually gone this deep into any project like this. I haven't really done a lot of sheet metal welding. I did a little bit on the box when I had to patch a hole in the bed. But this is the first big one. And I have to admit, I'm nervous about just cutting into this thing. I bought this truck brand new, and I think that's part of it, is I remember seeing this thing when it was in really nice shape. And now I've got these gaping holes, so it shouldn't be an issue. I can't really make it any worse yet. You know, I'm sitting here struggling to get that grinder started for the first time, so bear with me as I get started. All right, before we get started, we're going to pull the door off. So in order to get the door off, we're going to pull this sill plate, and then this little kick panel, and then this side panel, so that we can get at the wiring for the door. So let's get going on that. So here's what I'm going to do to get this door off. I'm going to leave the hinge with the truck, and it's my understanding that these two bolts that hold the bottom hinge on are not adjustable, so I think all the adjustment is done on this side. So in order to get a better chance at getting this thing back together right, I'll take these two off, and then when I get up here onto the upper hinge, I'll remove that bottom bolt. You can see it sticking up through there, and then the top just lifts right off of there. So 3 bolts and it'll be off. I'm using my engine lift to support the door so that when I unbolt it, I can just hang it right from that lift. Makes it a nice one-man job. So my 3 bolts are out, and all I need to do then, you can see that moves. So all I need to do is just lift this off of that hinge now. All right, the door's off, it's out of our way. Now I can get full access to the front of this rocker, so that'll make it a lot easier to get the whole rocker on. The next thing I want to do is remove that box. I need to do that so I can get all the way behind that cab corner because I know I've got rust. I can feel it all the way up to here. So I definitely need to do that whole cab corner. So if you want to see how the box comes apart, look somewhere around here. I'll put a link to a series of videos I put out removing that box and replacing it. But the next thing you're going to see is me heading down to the cabin garage. I want to unbolt this box. I'm going to take it over, take the whole truck to the cabin, back into the garage, and suspend this box from my rafters. It'll be out of the way while I do the rest of this work. All right, I got the box off, and I'm kind of taking a look here now just at the frame and the cross members to see what I want to do while I have that off, and this is what I discovered. Yeah, my cross member here that supports the gas tank is completely rusted through, so I'm going to deal with that. I'll do that in a separate video. Along with all the other work, I'm going to take a needle scaler and just take all of this scale off of here and see if there's anything else that needs attention. But this is the time to do it. So we're about ready to get started now on the driver's side. And I've already done most of the passenger side with the exception of the cab corner. And I wanted to do that just to use it as a learning tool and figure out how to do this one the best way. So here's my learnings. First, a couple of confessions. These are the parts that I have. So that's the outer rocker, that's the structural support, that's my cab corner. So this is all for the driver's side. I will tell you, take a little bit of time and look really close at your stuff before you start, because mistake number one, I grabbed the rocker panel. I actually grabbed this rocker panel and I started with this one on the other side. It jumped right into it and cut that off thinking this was the front. Turns out this was the one for the driver's side. So I've already had to weld this piece that I cut out back on so I can use it on this side. It's way too expensive to just buy another one of these, and this will be just fine. The other mistake I made is on the cab corner and trying to get my order right. I started with the cab corner, ended up while the cab corner was on, it looked great. I just tacked it in, but when I started putting my rocker on, I noticed the cab corner was about a 1/2 inch higher than where this rocker landed. That means that cab corner had to come back off, and I really don't want to mess around with that one as far as trying to weld stuff in. That'll be very visible. So I have another cab corner on order to the tune of another 50 bucks. So take your time. The advice here is do the rocker first, work your way back, and when this is all set and in, only then start working on that cab corner, and then you'll have the reference point you need. So here's how I'm starting on this. I'm setting this panel in here just to get it positioned. Now before I could do that, I had to trim the end of this off because it really goes all the way up underneath here. And I'm not going to pull the fender off. I'll keep this piece in case I ever do and I can put it back in. But this is how I want to start with this. So I trimmed it. Ran it intentionally a little bit long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a zip cut and go right through both layers so that this lines up perfectly when I go to weld it back in. And then we'll move on. Next, I need to get all of these spot welds out, and I've got a row of them along the top and there's a row along the bottom. Now I'm not going to bother with these on the bottom. I'm actually going to cut this out because the very bottom of this inner rocker is rusted, and I'm going to replace that. Okay, before I drill out my last spot weld, I'm going to show you what I'm using to drill. I know a lot of people will use just a plain old drill bit. I'm using a spot weld drill bit, and it's basically got a little pin on the end on a spring, and then what looks like a little tiny hole saw with a shoulder on it. And it works really well, but here's one of the problems I've run into. You see all these little lines here? If I press too hard before I've got a good trough started, it sometimes skips out of there. So here's what I'm doing to prevent that. What I'm using is a small drill bit just to start, not even all the way through, just to start a dimple. And this pin rides right inside that dimple, and that keeps the hole saw from jumping out of there, and it has been working a lot better for me. Right, the rocker's out, that inner support is out, and this is how you know when you start looking at these things that you're doing the right thing. I know some people would just buy those cheap covers that you put right over the top of the rocker, but just look at this. That's the outer rocker, but here's the inner support. I mean, it's supposed to have a flange like this on the bottom. It's completely gone. There's a little bit left, but I'm glad I'm doing this the right way. And that's just a small part of what's fallen down as I've been doing this work. So yeah, it was pretty bad in there. Now the next thing I want to do is get a closer look at this inner rocker. I don't want to replace the whole inner rocker, and I don't see a need to, but I do have rust along probably the bottom 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches. And then I notice back here it goes up a little higher, so I may have to patch in a bigger piece back here, but it's all worth the trouble. All right, upon further review with the aid of a good flap disc, this all looks like solid metal here, and I know underneath here is pretty bad. So I've drawn a line just about 1 inch up all the way along here. I'm going to take from here down out. I'll have to drill a couple rivets because there's a support behind here, but I'll just take this piece out and make a new one. All right, this is what I'm using for that bottom of the inner rocker. It's just an old weight machine that I grabbed and have kind of left in my scrap pile for a while. Just taking this right here will give me, I need 1 inch on one side and 3/4 on the other. That'll give me the profile I need. And what I need to do with this is just make a nice straight cut, and I'll maybe use a piece of angle iron as a guide. I need to weld it in. And then once I'm done with that, this bottom lip here is not really a 90°. So I'll just grab one of my clamps that's got a wider face on it and just work my way down and bend it out to the right angle. Okay, we got it all made up. We got a nice patch piece here, ready to go. I got the inner rocker all cut out and cleaned up, ready to be welded. Now what I'm going to do is just tack this into place. Right, got the inner rocker done. Got that piece all welded in. So that's good and secure, and I don't know if you can see it very well. I bent the bottom down so that matches the profile that it should. And then I just cleaned up this seam so that when I spot weld this back together, it'll stay nice and tight. Inner rockers are all ready to go. So we get that bottom piece welded in, and then I primed them and I put a coat of Rust-Oleum on. So that will be protected. Now I can move on and start looking at these panels that are going to go on. Okay, before I was able to go any further, I had to do some prep work on these panels. This is my outer rocker. There's my support. Now they come when you buy them with this black finish, and this isn't really a good protective finish. All this does is just keeps them from flash rusting. So I wanted to get a little bit more down on that. So I treated both sides of the inner panel because I won't be able to get to that once it's installed. The outer panel, I'm leaving the outside alone. I'll take care of that after it's installed. But I did do the inside. And you'll see these edges haven't been covered. They actually have a weld-through primer. So the next thing we're going to do now is fit these up one more time and mark them for spot welds. All right, got the inner panel drilled and fitted in. I'm going to weld that whole inner panel in before I move to the outer. The inner panel is all spot welded in now. Now I'm just going to grind these welds down and we'll put the outer rocker on. Here's the outer rocker all fitted up, and I just put 4 welds in, spot welds, 1 up there, 1 there, 2 underneath, just to hold it in place. And I put the door back on. I thought it would be a good idea to check the fit before I commit. All right, I'm happy with the fit. Everything is lining up just like it did before I took the door off. And down here we're matched up real nice. So I think I can weld that in. I'm going to stop here today. I am almost out of welding gas and I'm completely out of wire. So I have to go buy more, but I did get the rocker attached. I've got all the spot welds along the top and the bottom done now. So that's in solid. Now I want to show you a couple of things real quick here. Here's my poor fitment. I'm not going to be able to span that with a weld. I'm going to have to do a little bit of work on that. And here on the back, kind of got a similar problem. So I'm not going to beat myself up too much about this. This actually is my first rodeo, so some of this is expected, I guess, as I learn. I cut a little sliver here and ground it to fit and just welded that in. I still have to do some grinding to clean this up, but that's how I have to fix this one and the next one. Okay, here's how I'm going to address these gaps. I'm not going to try to do this in one piece. I'll do it in a couple of different pieces. But I took a piece that I had cut out, trimmed it down, Whoops, I got it backwards. So we're gonna tuck it in there, just like that. I'll weld it in and kind of work my way around and get that all in there as filler. Then I'll work my way down. Okay, I got that patch tacked in here. So I think I will put a few more tacks on it and then move on and finish up the vertical part of this gap. I have that first patch in and I've done a little bit of grinding on it. So I'm going to stop there and continue on with the rest. This is the last section I have to do. I can fill that with weld, that's not a big deal. And instead of trying to cut a piece of metal to fit this, I'll take a piece of coat hanger instead. It'll bridge in really nicely right there and I should be able to weld that right in. Okay, this is all welded up now and I ground off my welds. It's not super pretty and I could body work this, put some filler in and make it look nice. But considering where this sits, I may just run my primer and paint and call that one good enough. Next, we're going to move on to the cab corners. So I trimmed both the pickup itself and the cab corner down a little bit so there'd be less overlap. But you can see I've still got probably a little over an inch of overlap because I don't want to take too much out. So I've laid these in place, clamped them on the bottom as close as I could. It's a little tough because you've got these lips on both edge, so it's tough to get it there, but I think we're close enough that I can cut. And what I'm going to do now is just run a zip cut through both layers and hopefully they'll match up. All right, let's check the fit up and see how we did. Yep, that's going to work nice. I'm happy with that. All right, I'm ready to fit up the driver's side corner. I already did the passenger side and I learned that it's a really good idea to get that door back on when you fit this up. Because on that side, I fit it up, I welded it in a couple of spots, probably 2 spots too many, and then I put the door on and I was off a little bit, so I had to do a little bit of rework to get that where I wanted it. So in this case, I've already got the driver's door on and I'm going to fit this up now. Just already took a first pass at this. And I think that is a nice fit. I'm going to start by tacking this corner and this corner over here, and that'll still give me a little bit of room for adjustment if I need to. Hopefully this is pretty close. And I think I'm not even going to be tipping it this way. It's more a matter of kind of pulling the bottom out a little bit to get this door seam lined up nice. Let me show you how the back of the cab corner fits in here. It doesn't go over the top. It actually goes underneath this back panel. So it'll tuck up in there, and then I've got some holes to weld it in place. Then we finish it out with seam sealer. All right, I'm welded in, ground down. I'm going to have to put some body filler on this for sure. And if you really wanted to see how to weld sheet metal, there are a lot of people out there that do it a lot better than me. That's why I didn't bother filming this. Now, the last piece I got to finish off is this down here. We've got a pretty good gap, and I think that gap has to do with this piece. You remember I had to weld this back together, and I think when I welded it back together I shortened it up enough that I'm going to end up with a gap here now, but I could put a filler piece in there and make that go away. Alright, that's it. We're done with all the welding. So we've got this ground down and ready for some body work. I put seam sealer back here. We'll just shoot paint over that when we're done. And I fixed up this gap. Not very visible, so you know, maybe put a little bit of filler in there and just paint it. But just like the welding, for this part of the body work, I'm not going to bother filming it. There's a lot of people that have much better instructional videos. So I'll come back when all this is done and show you what we ended up with. Alright, I'm back. Everything's been painted, and what I did is I painted that cab corner, the rocker underneath, and then the bottom of the door, both the doors. I had some surface rust, so I sanded that off and shot those. I just used gloss black Rust-Oleum, and it matched up pretty nice. You notice the top half of the door is kind of hazed. I think I had some overspray on that from, I think, when I was putting the primer on here. So now I'm going to have to do a little bit of wet sanding to clean that up, but that's okay. So let's take a look inside. Now if you look real close, you'll be able to see my bodywork here and even on this corner. But I'm really happy with this. This is a driver quality piece of work. You notice I've got all these other scratches and nicks. So it didn't really make sense to send this into a shop to have them do that work and make it perfect. Probably would have made the rest of the truck look even worse. But it's all nice and solid now. The rust is gone, and this should last for a long time. Now, what are my learnings from this? I guess the first one, I'd mentioned it earlier, is I decided to take the doors off using these bolts here, leave the hinges with the body, and that worked great. I had these doors on and off a lot, and they always lined up nice. On that note, the other thing is make sure that you bring the doors back in and put them back on as you're doing these body panels to ensure good fitment. It helps you figure out where to clamp things. Do the rockers first, then the cab corners. And like I said earlier, if you want a perfect job, take it to a body shop, take it to a professional. But if you're like me, this is good enough. I think this is pretty economical for me. And all I've got is just a MIG welder and some basic tools, and you can do the same. It's not that hard. If you're still with me, thanks for watching through the whole video. And I hope you learned something. I know I learned a lot. So thanks again for joining me, and we'll see you again next time.